Hello, I'm Karl Brazil, and I'm here at London's O2, about to do the third show with Robbie Williams on the Swings Both Ways tour. And I wanted to take this opportunity to give you a little talk through my kit, bit of a kit tour. So I'm going to start with my stool, which is very important we're comfy and you've got the right posture. This is a BC2 Porter & Davis. If you don't know about these stools come with a little valve amp or a little rack-mounted amp, and you can basically alter how much oomph you get in. It gives you a real kick. It's basically substitute for a sub monitor. I've got no monitors here at all. I'm on in-ears, so this stool gives me a nice bolt through the backside, if you like, but it gives you that little bottom end and the sensation of a sub bass unit. So the BC2 Porter & Davis, very comfy. They're doing them in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, but that's where it starts. Then this gig's predominantly swing, so I've had to change my setup quite a bit. I've gone for a Brooklyn kit in smaller sizes to what I normally use. I've got 12, 14, 16. I normally have 13, 16, 18, so when I sat down at the kit originally, I was like, wow, this is quite a different feel, but that's a good thing because this gig requires a totally different sound, different approach to playing, and I've really had to think about the sound more than anything. So these Brooklyn shells, for example, the bass drum is 22 by 14. It's a shallow kick, more traditional, and feels nice and sounds right for this gig. The Brooklyn shells are great. I find them a lot more responsive than the USA maple shells, for example. I've got Ambassador vintage A's on these. I'll go through the heads in a second, but let's finish with the drums. So we've got 12, 14, 16 floors, 22 by 14 kick. On the left here is a Gretsch 6.5. It's actually a brass snare. It's covered. It looks very dark, but it's a chrome over brass, dark chrome, and it's gorgeous. I don't think they make these drums anymore, which is a real shame. Maybe they should bring them back. But it's got a really deep sound, which I'd use for a track called Go Gentle or Candy, or maybe Angels. But I do swap snares, so I'll also talk through that in a second. That's really low and dead. So because the gig is mainly swing, I have to have more of a pingy snare, and I ended up going for the Ludwig Black Beauty, which has got loads of pang, and it's got a low rim as well, which is great for just getting those nice little rolls off. So it's quite an exciting, responsive snare, which is perfect for this gig. This is a 14 by 5. Also on the gig, I'm swapping out the main snare, this one, for this Gretsch 5.5 maple shell. Totally, it's a matte finish, natural wood. I do actually think that the natural shells are more responsive. I think they give you loads more tone, whereas a covered shell like this is more. It might be a psychological thing. I think it smothers it a tiny bit, but I have to say, I couldn't not have this finish for this gig. So it's the Champagne Sparkle looks gorgeous. But that snare, going back to the snare, I swapped that out for Angels and a track called Sensational at the end, which just needs a bit more of a whack and a bit more of a thud. Now I could use that one there, but that's just too deep. So I'm very particular about snare sounds, and it might not pick up too well on here. But this has just got a nice solid snare. So between the three of them throughout the gig, when the set changes, I can basically accommodate any tracks. And let's move on to the heads, because the heads are very important in the sound. It's something else I've changed in my setup recently for this gig as well. So let's start with the tom. Again, I'm using vintage Ambassadors, coated. And you've probably noticed there's a little handprint on all of these heads, which I decided to do just before the tour. It's actually my son's handprint. He's 4, his name's Finn. Every night I'm playing and I'm having a moment looking at this huge crowd, I'll just look down and see his little handprints and think of him sleeping, or, you know, it's a nice little home reminder. So heads, we've got vintage A's on all of these, coated, really nice, perfect for this gig. No gels on these at all, no dampening, just so they can ring out, and that. So with such a big band, you kind of need that. You need that sustain in your drums. Snares, On the left here for the extra thud, I've got a very thick Emperor X, which I tend to use all the time on most gigs and recordings. But on the Black Beauty, I've got a control sound, which is quite thick again, but not as thick. And it's nice and easy to tune. On the bottoms of these toms, we've got diplomats, clear diplomats. And on the bottom of the snares, we've just got snare hazes. Yes. Kick. Kick is a Power Stroke 3, coated P3 with a felt beater, which, I mean, just here now it sounds great, and I've got no sub on. The stall's not even on, but there's plenty of weight off that. It's really nice. And it's quite open as well. If I put too much dampening in it for this gig, it won't sound like a big band bass drum, so I have kind of had to cater for both. It's got a tiny bit of dampening, and on front is a coated Ambassador, a traditional logo head. And all the tension rods, I would say, are just past finger tight on both sides, which gives, it's just the perfect pitch. With the tuning on the toms, actually, while we're talking about tuning, all the shells, top and bottom, all tuned exactly the same. And I have to thank Clint, my drum tech. He's done a fantastic job. Whenever he changes heads, I don't really have to do anything. He knows my sound and what I like, so that's good. Snare drums, we know what they sound like. I think that pretty much covers all the heads, so I'm fully Remo kitted out. Let's move on to cymbals. Sabian being my cymbal of choice. Again, I have changed this cymbal setup to suit the gig. I've actually got 3 ride cymbals, but I don't class them as ride cymbals. We'll start on the left with this cheeky little splash, which I've called the circus cymbal, because there's just a few hits on the gig that require that little cheeky psh, because I haven't used a splash for years. I sort of grew out of it and then reintroduced it for this, so it's nice to be reconnected with the splash world. Hats. This is quite a weird one. 15-inch artisan hats. You wouldn't really associate them with a big band gig, but I love the weight of these hats. They're really nice to play. I've got used to the weight on my left foot. Now I'm in a 1 and 3 world. Is that right? 1 and 3 world? 2 and 1. Yeah, I'm in a 2. I'm in a 1, 2, 4, 2 and 4 world. Let's get it right. So now I'm in a 2 and 4 world. I need the weight on the hats, and I've also done a little thing with my bass drum beater, and I've made it closer to the skin, so that I don't feel like the power's this side. The power's on the left now and driving from the foot. So there's a little thing I did to remind myself, but it's really worked dynamically. But 15-inch artisan hats are the best. I use them on most gigs, and they work. They really work in this sound. So I haven't needed to change anything there. I mean, they're quite dark and big, but they're sitting pretty. So I'm not changing them for anything. This thing here is possibly my favourite cymbal. It's a 21-inch Legacy Ride. It should say Crash Ride because it makes such a good crash cymbal as well. I use it for verses and jazz, and then I also use it for big hits in, you know, kids, angels, anything. It works for everything. So the Legacy stuff is amazing. Great cymbals, and the sustain is beautiful as a crash. It's a mighty big crash, but it works. This one here, I think they should bring into production. I found this in LA when I went to the Sabian office. It's a prototype. I would compare this ride cymbal to the Omni Ride, which is a really good cymbal. It's got two plain surfaces, one dark and one nice and bright, and you can crack it a bit as well. But it's great for the jazz and the big band stuff. It really is. I think if we were playing a lot more of the heavier stuff, I'd go for a Legacy heavy ride. I have fell in love with that. It's really nice. This cymbal here, 18-inch crash, fast crash, disappears quick, but great for brass hits on this gig. Again, it was something that was done for Cymbal Vote probably about 12 months ago. I don't know if you can see the surface, but it's got really, it's a beautiful hand-hammered finished cymbal. 3 different areas to hit, if you like. Looks pretty. It's a fast crash, so it disappears quick, which is perfect. And it's called the 3-point crash, which is a good name. I think they should bring it back, myself. And finally, 21-inch Legacy Ride with rivets. This plays a lot of different roles on the gig. It's great for riding with rivets, or it's good for hits that you want to last, splash, big crash that you want to last, because the rivets just keep that sizzle going. I always say the rivet cymbals also make it sound like a vinyl record sometimes when you're playing it. It's got something of old retro vibe to it, but I don't know. But that completes my cymbal lineup, and I have to say I'm really content. I've got all the sounds here that I need to play on the gig. Sticks. I had to change my sticks as well. I've even changed my hair for this gig. It's unbelievable. But the sticks, I went for an AJ2 and made it a signature stick because of the shaft. It's great for the top end. Just getting that top end wrist action going is perfect. These sticks aren't heavy enough though to play Angels and say Sensational and Candy. So I ended up getting 2 pairs of sticks. I got the 8D, which I believe Steve Jordan uses. Really nice stick, not too heavy. I was using 55As, but for this gig again, so I went down the AJ2 route and the 8Ds. Now there's not a lot of difference. The shaft's a bit bigger on the 8D, if you can see it. So they would snap easier if I was using them for the wrong songs. But so these come into play. Now the best thing is we didn't think about this. They both look the same, signatures, my son's handprint, but there's no indication of what the stick is on it. So my tech's very carefully marked the bottom of some of them so that I can see them in the bag and I don't get mixed up, which is very nice of him. I'm using wire brushes, Vic Firth wire brushes. I use Vic Firth mallets. What are these? T3s. They work for me. I don't use mallets an awful lot. So in the stick, that's everything covered in the stick area. As you can see, I've thought about everything on this gig, and it's very important, whatever gig you're doing, whoever you're playing with, studio, live, that you've got the right sound, the right heads, the right approach. That's a big part of it. And then obviously the playing will if you've got the sound right, the playing will start to sound right too, I believe. So that completes the setup of cymbals, drums, heads, sticks, hardware. I'd moved to DW last year and recently started using these flush bass stands, which are superb, perfect for this gig. I'm not sure if I could use them playing with feeder or anybody that was slightly heavier, because I think they would go. I'm happy to put it to the test, but for this gig they look great and they really work. And I've gone to the 6,000 pedals as well, flat hi-hat stand, flat snare stand, and a bass drum pedal with a strap, which is something I'd never done before. But again, for this, I've been playing a lot more flat-footed for the jazzier stuff, and it feels great. So I don't know how I'm going to go back to using a chain again. I normally use 9,000 stuff, but I have to say this gear is great. So with DW, I'm kind of very well kitted out, and I find every bit of their hardware solid. And the crew, my tech Clint, he swears by them. So that's more important because he has to pack the things down every night. Anyway, finally, all this kit gear sits on protection racket mat, which I think we've used every bit of space on it, but I'd like to thank those guys because we've got cases, wash bags, carpets all over this tour. So thanks for that, Dino. And I'm using Ultimate ears, and I'm using what else have I got? That's pretty much it, I think. I think I've covered all bases. I am using these new moon gels on the snare, and they're clear. They're a bit dirty. They're Winsent, are they? Winsent moon gels. These are a bit dirty, but I think they're great, and they come in packs of little sizes, so you don't have to chop them up. But sometimes you just want a tiny little tic-tac like that, and it just works. Just to throw that on one shell if you're getting something is just enough. So they actually do lug locks as well, I think, which these are really good. They're almost like cymbal felts. I've started using these little Winston square lug locks that come in a little white box. Very good bit of kit to have. I think that's all my gadgets and everything. I think we've done everything. Yes, we have. So I hope you've enjoyed that little tour, and I hope it's of some kind of use to you. And thank you to the guys for coming down from iDrum. And I'll see you out there somewhere soon. Cheers. Bye.